Midrash, Halachot, and Agot. We're going to talk about that a little later. 3 parts to a day, evening, morning, afternoon. 3 words, I can't read on this side, 3 words that represent sanctification. We say this a lot in our services. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Right? Holy, holy, holy. 3 groups of Jewish people. These were, right? The Kohanes, the Levites, and the Israelites. The biblical 3 sections. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
3 important kings, Saul, David, and Solomon. Moses was a Levite, okay? He was the son of Yaakov, of Jacob. He was the 3rd son, and there's 3 letters in his name, big deal. Moses was one of 3 children, Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Why is it always 3, right? The Hebrew name of Moses has 3 letters, Mem, Shin, and He. 3 months, baby Moses was hidden in the reeds of the Nile River. The eternal Triad, wholeness and unity. Yeah. Notice I write God with the dash and not an O to remind me I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, that's why, rather than making the idea an idol. Okay. We have a lot of Hebrew names. What we mean by what we say in English is God. We use Hashem, which means the name. That's all. And we have others that we'll talk about later, about like Adonai and El Shaddai. The minimum number of Torah verses for an aliyah. An aliyah is they come to a service and we're reading from the scrolls. 7 people are called up one after the other to point on the scroll as someone reads it, to follow the Hebrew. And you have to have at least 3 sentences to honor that aliyah. Okay, now, the human habit of looking for patterns of 3. So this involves you. 3's company. Okay. 3's a crowd, or the 3rd time's the charm, or bad news always comes in 3s. Why is it always 3? Everything, look at the word like. Jonah was inside the belly of the fish for 3 days and nights. Jesus answered Satan's 3-fold temptations with the 3 scriptural references. Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Do you know Peter's Hebrew name, real name? It was Shimon. Shimon, Simon. Yeah, fisherman of men. Why was he named Peter? Peter is from the Greek, Petros, which means a rock. Upon this rock, right? I'll establish there. Jesus affirmed his love 3 times. Jesus' resurrection on the 3rd day. Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years. And Peter denied knowing Jesus, guess what? 3 times. There's got to be something to do this. So, no doubt, I'll read it out if anyone has trouble. No doubt the biblical authors often employed the number or wrote in patterns of 3 to provide a special emphasis or a clue, a hint, that there was something more than meets the eye in the events recorded. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so that's 3. But now let's go on to this program. So out of the eternal Triad, I hope to pass on the thought, the idea, that there's an impulse to our religions to express the common unconscious. Now, I didn't say the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is Carl Jung, right? I prefer common. Collective seems to me seems you're collecting things. from other people's minds to produce something, right? Collective unconscious. But being Jewish, I would interpret it as the common unconscious. We all have the same source. And available, whatever it comes. So I use the impulse to express that common unconscious which we all own. Okay? So in talking about the Trinity, we go back to Taoism. You pronounce the T as a D, don't you?
Yes.
So it's Taoism, and you have a superior conciliatory principle. It says conciliatory for the principle because it's uniting the positive and negative principles at the lower part of the triangle. Right? So down below we have the two principles, the inferior and the negative principles, the plus and minuses, the yin and the yang, or the yang and the yin, you know those terms. Let's see how that's been interpreted. So you all know the Taiki. You've seen this before, I'm sure. So rather than the triangle, you have the circle. And you notice on the Star of David down here, we have the outside point, joining all the points, which gives you the oneness of God. Okay? I don't know yet how we say in Hebrew. So within that oneness, we have the motion and the noise and everything of creation. We have everything moving. So it's expressed here, the black is the yin and the yang is the white. That might be like the negative and the positive. And, but those angles, like the two lower angles of the triangle, which are the two colors we see there, now you notice nothing's entirely black and nothing's entirely white, which means that those two inferior triangles are relative, not absolute. What is absolute is something we can't understand, but it's the tip of that triangle. It's the circle. It's a circle we receive inspiration from, but we're always wondering about that, what we belong to. Carry on. So for example, the yang, the white and the yin, so they're opposites, like positive, negative, masculine, feminine, dry, wet, hot, cold, summer, winter, day, night, movement, immobility, all the opposites. Beauty, ugliness, truth, error, construction, destruction, and ego and not ego, life, not and death. And death is simply not self. So Hinduism, we have Brahma, the ultimate principle, and down below the two relative principles down below, Vishnu, which is the preserver of things, and Shiva, which is the destroyer of things. I think I have it written out because you may not understand my English. Under authority, okay, the Vishnu. And you know, the son of Vishnu was Krishna, who is the Moses for Hinduism, if you will, right? And these are principles. These aren't simply gods, as we know with different gods, pagan gods. These are ideas, principles we're talking about. Hinduism. What about Christianity? Of course, you have the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we'll go into all of these separately. So under the authority of the supreme principle, the Father, creation is the simultaneous work of the Son and the Holy Spirit. In Judaism, we express it by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Abraham, under the authority of the one God, which is monotheism, Abraham, the idea. Creation is the simultaneous work of Isaac, representing the will, and of Jacob, the purpose. I put a purpose of Israel, but purpose of everything. That's the Trinity in Judaism. So let's get down to, anyone here remember the name George Grant? Dr. George Grant? Remember? Yeah, I'm glad someone remembers him. He was my professor way back in 1954 and 55 at Dal. He was a well-known politician, but a great philosopher. Did you know him, hear of him?
I did, and I heard him speak.
And you heard him speak. He used to come to my apartment and speak. Dino Pappas, do you remember Dino?
Yes.
Dino and I shared the same apartment when we went to Dal. And George Grant took a liking to Dino because Dino, when he wrote his essays, included Greek words. Right? The last exam we had with Dr. George Grant was to write an essay on does God exist? Okay. So I use the term, which I'm going to use here, tokalon. Tokalon in Greek is the good. Plato referred to the good as the superior principle. Okay, tokalon. So what do we mean by a supreme idea? Well, I'm going to build a chair. So, voila. Okay, there's the chair. I have an idea. We all get ideas. So what's an idea made up of? An idea, first of all, is eternal. An idea doesn't have, you can't touch it, you can't do anything with it. It's an idea, it's outside of time. That's not so mysterious, an idea. So, let's say you have an idea that you want to build a chair. So why the idea? Well, there must be a reason why you have the idea. And that reason is, what is it going to do when it comes into time, when you make it, right? So this is picked up by Jung also when he talks the collective unconscious. So I'm going to build a chair, and what's it going to look like? Well, that's the form. I have an idea, and the form is part of the idea. And why do I want the chair? What's its function? Okay, the function is, well, I want to be able to sit on it. Okay, so what do I do then? I have an idea made up of form and function, and this has to do with all ideas, not just the chair. An idea is eternal, and it's realized in some sort of form and function, and becomes part of our vocabulary and everything else. Or a chess line, form and function. So then in time, what do? I'm now leaving eternity. In time, I pick up my tools. I get some lumber for the wood. And in time, I try to make a chair, hopefully, that will be close enough to my idea that I feel good about it. Right? So let's look to take that on. The form and function is the chair. Now it's interesting because I won't sit in one, but if I sit on the chair after I make it, I say to myself, that's a good chair. Form and function are fulfilling the eternal idea. It's something like you are the form and function of an idea. Okay? But if I sit on the chair and one leg is shorter than the other, it's wobbly, I say that's a terrible chair, that's a bad chair. But I go back to the idea to see if I can make it according to the idea, which is each. So I'm talking about eternal and temporal. Okay, form and function and the idea. There's attributes to these angles. Reason is up above and will and appetite down below. And the attributes of reason is if reason is functioning correctly, it takes you to wisdom. Secular reason. The will is courage. Now, going back to Plato. Plato says that courage is knowledge of what not to fear. Knowledge of what not to fear, that gives you courage and the willpower. And appetite here is the attribute of moderation. So we're playing again with the triangles, so that we have the supreme idea up above, and plus and minus is down below. And then we, who cannot understand the supreme idea that's eternal, comes to us, but we don't fully, we apply its ideas in time. We do an intellectual abstraction of what the plus and minuses are, because we can't intellectualize the supreme idea. This time I'm not talking about a chair. So here we have the supreme idea up above, and we don't have a vision of it. We have our daily lives, but we're not really conscious of that superior concept. You may have glimpses of it and inspirations of it. Certainly that's why we go to church, the synagogue, and the mosque, to reach out, to feel, have that spiritual feeling. But without that, we're stuck with our own judgment, our human. We make human judgments of the plus and minuses down below. For example, the minus one. I don't want a child to put their hand on a hot stove. Okay, it's a hot stove. If he puts his hand on it, because it's negative, but it's relatively negative. Because if I want to build a house, you see, that's plus, but if I have to cut down the trees to build the house, that's negative. That's why it's relative, because it's both, right? A little bit of both. Okay, human judgment. The other thing we're looking at here is human judgment without seeing the supreme idea. The supreme idea, I would say, is the Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim is the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, okay? As soon as we start applying judgment, human judgment, that's the danger that we're told in the Garden of Eden, because we're judging things that don't necessarily apply, but to our own egocentric judgment. And so that would be the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Huh? And the story, the metaphor, and I stressed metaphor in last week's thing. The metaphor, you dig deep, you find these possible hints and meanings, right? And you come up with the idea that don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but it's a case you can't help it, right? You have to, we're human, we have to, and we don't see but we have to realize maybe that isn't as supreme as we think. On the one side, we say this is good, the other side we say, oh, that's bad. Relative, what we don't even think of them as being relative, we just say, oh, that's not good, that's so bad. But, so we have created that by our own human judgment. And what's the next step? Without seeing or having an idea of the supreme principle, we say good is then, we make it instead of relative, all of a sudden we're making it absolute good. That's our human chutzpah. You know that term? Chutzpah. And the bad is absolute evil. So take it one step further. Absolute good becomes God. And absolute bad, we have to have, if we have an absolute good God, we have to have a devil to balance out. But that's not the absolute, is it? So we all have different religions, which are fine, because we're all trying to get to the supreme idea. But we can only express those ideas by what we've created. Mankind has created. But the impulse to create those thoughts can be sacred. Right? The yearning for the top of the triangle is holy. So, our famous Tai Chi, because we're making things absolute, you notice that the little dots in each part of the white and black disappears. Things are no longer relative. They become absolute in our mind. That's kind of neat, isn't it? All right, a little bit more. So we have absolute good, which affirms ourself. Anything that says yes to our ego, our sense of self, is the good side. Absolute evil denies the self. That's really, we can think of a lot of things which are naughty and not nice, but the ones that deny our self-image really hurts, right? That's the absolute side. And that's the denial of affirmation. We have a preferential affectation for good. Why? Because it's active and personal. The plus is active and personal, whereas evil is reactive and impersonal. Let me take this to politics, for example, or to your church board meetings, or to our museum board meetings, or whatever. It doesn't matter what group. What group? You always have those who are active, right? And you always have those who react to the activity. But they're relative on both sides. That can cause political problems, right? So let's look at our favorite poet, Isaiah. Isaiah 45 says, I am the Lord, and there is, by the way, when I write in English, I'm using the English words, which are not always, as we learned last week, actually the same thing as the Hebrew. I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. I gird you, though you have not known me. That they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am the Lord, and there is no one else now. I form the light and create darkness, the yin and the yang, okay? I make peace and create evil. How can we say that? It's our God that we can't believe in that. But if you look back and think of the supreme principle, how come we can forgive God? How can we say that God creates evil? Why does Isaiah say that? We can't figure that out. Well, you can when you think that he has given us the choice between the yin and the yang. It's up to us to choose, not God to step into our human history that way. Otherwise, we won't fulfill our mission. Free choice is our inheritance. Now, Amalek, it was like the Hitler of the day. The hand of Amalek reaches all the way to the throne of God. That's evil, negativity, all the way to the supreme principle. God cannot stop Amalek without wiping out the evil in the world, and such an act would also eliminate the possibility of free choice and leaves the world bereft of its purpose for us to find out how to choose. We're not given things on the platter in our human condition. The duty to stop the evil belongs to us, not to God. We must bring the evil in ourselves under the strict control of our reason, aided and guided by the moral commandments of the Torah. Now, when I say Torah, I'm talking about teachings, our teachings. That's what Torah means. Right, Anna? I have a few Israelis here, so I've got to be careful. If we crush the inner darkness within our own hearts, and the destructive powers in the world also come under the control of reason, okay? The light of civilization scatters the darkness of the primitive urge to destroy. And that's history. V'taher libenu le'avdecha be'emet. That means ease up on my heart. You know, my reactions. Ease up on my heart, which can sometimes be negative here, that I may touch the truth or know the truth. It's not to say get away from the Spirit. It means I also want to know why. We're meaning-seeking animals, aren't we? And we want to know why, but we have these impulses. So the prayer we say on the Sabbath in Hebrew, in our service, is V'taher libenu, V'taher libenu. In case they had never heard, they only know it by song. V'taher libenu le'avdecha be'emet. So here we are with our two trees. We have the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the normal human state, and it's the normal human state is to lose sight of innocence, the universal knowledge, in order to judge. We need to judge, our human judgment. And our human judgment is a tool for physical survival, like don't put your hand on a hot stove, for example, to put it mildly. It's up to us to judge. That's our invitation. Okay, but hopefully we give some thought to it, to our judgments. Whereas the Torah is the tree of life, that second tree in the Garden of Eden. And the Torah to us is study, justice, and charity. Study can approach universal knowledge once hidden, now revealed. To us, the highest form of worship is study, to feel it. The highest form of worship, okay, is study. We start off by not knowing, and we keep trying to know. And we have that standard joke, if you have two Jews together discussing Torah or discussing politics, you have about 8 or 9 opinions. Okay? It's an ongoing thing. The Garden of Eden, the Gan Eden, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge and good and evil. But we just discovered something that we saw last week, that when you read biblical text, you don't take it literally, but you're leaving an awful lot. You're robbing yourself of some more insight. So here we have let's put it this way. The bottom part of our judgment area is the tree of knowledge of plus and minus. And then as we go up towards wisdom, we're in the state of Satori. Anyone knows Zen Buddhism? But Zen Buddhism, Satori is a word for, you might say, enlightenment. And it might be a flash. It's not something you don't live with. I mean, you get this, Aldous Huxley talked a lot about Satori. And even some of the great writers, like Somerset Maugham and others. So that's going towards the tip is Satori, realization. Here I have it in English. In the Zen Buddhism tradition, Satori refers to the experience of Kensho, which is seeing into one's true nature. Ken means seeing, Sho means nature or essence. Satori and Kensho are commonly translated as enlightenment, a word that is also used to translate the Bodhi, the Bodhivita, Prajna, and the Buddhahood. Anyone, the mystics, the Christian mystics, talk about Satori. When I was in Belgium, it was we had Christian mystics, that I learned from the Catholic University. And so they all agree in their writings, and not many of them write after they have enlightenment. They just live. Right, but some try to express things to friends and people. But it's a moment of time where you leave the temporal world into the eternal world, and you don't exactly understand. Okay? But it can be a second, but it can be transformative. So now I'd like to go into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and show you how I think those three religions use the same technique to use their knowledge towards a divine satora. We're all like one, okay? But when I was going to Hebrew school, and there's no one left here that I went to Hebrew school with, but Rabbi Bab, I'm talking about now 1930s, right? Rabbi Bab was a terrific teacher. He pretended to be tough, like we had a little Hebrew school down on Colbert Street. And if I missed, and we used to go every day except Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, every day after school, after 3:30, we went from 4 to 6 at Hebrew school. Now, you've all been students, and when you get out at 3:30, that's it, right? But that's what we did. And if I was sick one day, say I didn't go, and the next day I came in, Rabbi Bab would look at me like this and say, "Oh, a visitor." But from Rabbi Bab, I learned a lot about Rashi. Now, Rashi is, see the letters R, A, S, H, and then the I. That's simply Rabbi Shlomo, the son of Yitzchak. See, the I is Yitzchak. Rashi is just a,
It was Carlton Street.
What?
It was Carlton Street.
Oh, Carlton Street.
Yeah.
Oh, God. That ruins everything. Okay, so notice 1040 to 1105. I say common era. That's what we use now. And BCE is before the common era. Common era starting with Jesus, right? Actually, it starts a little before, you know. And then my hero is Maimonides, the Rambam. Again, those letters come from Moses ben Maimonides, the Rambam. And he lived a little later than Rashi. And they both lived at a time of, in the Middle Ages, where there was a tremendous amount of study being done by the Jewish people. There was the Babylonian Academy and the Jerusalem Academy. We'll look at that a little later. But from them, we look at the dialectic approach to rabbinic Judaism. How does, and then I'm going to Christianity and Islam, okay? But how does rabbinic Judaism, see, the rabbinic Judaism is not the same as Israelite Hebrewism, all right? Once the temple was destroyed by the Romans, there was no place to go. People couldn't even travel to a temple like Israel had one. They didn't. If you lived way up north near the Golan, you'd have to go by horse and wagon or whatever to the temple maybe 3 times a year. But it wasn't like to have churches or synagogues every week, right? So rabbinic Judaism really took off. It did exist, scholars, before the loss of the temple, but once the temple was destroyed, we went into 2,000 years of exile in all different countries. There was no temple. So we had to have homes and synagogues and things in schools, right? Synagogue, a lot of people call this a synagogue. That's Greek again. It means a gathering place. We call it shul. Shul, that's Yiddish. And Yiddish is a dialect of German. And shul is school. And as I said, the highest form of prayer in Judaism is to study. So all over North America and parts of Europe, you'll hear people refer to it as shul. And it comes from the Yiddish. So let's see, there are steps towards ultimate knowledge. We can make up these steps. We start with the Pashut. Familiar with this? Right? Okay. What level are you at, Anna? So, Anna's our Hebrew school teacher. She's from Israel. She's great. So the Pashut is Hebrew for that stage of study. So I have notes here. It's the plot, the story, the literal meaning. It's a story, you know? Adam and Eve. That's just, all right? That's the literal story, the literal meaning of it. And that's what's being taught at this level, the Pashut. But then you can get up to another level. And we're building the triangle. You get up to another level, the remnants. There's hints from the Pashut. Maybe the grammar, the spelling, the syntax, the sentence structure, maybe all this stuff indicates deeper levels of meaning. Well, why? Grammar, spelling. So like I said last week, well, if we look at Adam, remember I said last week, Adam is Hebrew, is Adam, and Adam is from Adamah, and Adamah means the earth. In the beginning, there was the earth. And Eve in Hebrew is Chava, which means love. In the beginning, there's nature and the spirit. So we're already into a different level, aren't we? Okay? This level indicates deeper levels of meaning and hidden interrelationships within the text. So that takes us to the drash. All right? So here we have interpretation where the Bible is understood as a metaphor for each individual soul's unfolding. Now that doesn't mean it's false or phony. Something that you can only understand if it's given in a parable, for example, is worthwhile. Hopefully you get to that level. It's dragging you upstairs. Okay? After the drush, you can get to the sod. And that I can't really explain except say it's a secret, the mystical, and that's where Kabbalah comes in. Kabbalah is the mystical part of Judaism. It was taken up by people, and there's Kabbalistic books, and it's metaphysical, right? It's so metaphysical, I can't explain it, but I know what it is. So that takes us up to Pardes. So the first three letters of each step, P-R-D-S, in Hebrew it's P-R-D-S. And Pardes in Hebrew means either a garden or an orchard. So a growth. Isn't that perfect? It's a growth. The Garden of Eden is not just the Pashut, right? You can go to the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life, but that's why we say the highest form of worship in Judaism is study, to try and understand, because there's a wealth of truth. So that's the Rabbinic Judaism approach, which takes us to medieval Christianity. And guess what? We have the literal sense again. And from that, so these are the words of the Bible and Gospels demanding explanation. Right? Demanding explanation. And that's why you have ministers and priests. Okay. Because you demand explanations. So you get sometimes allegorical explanations. These are independent interpretations by several scholars. Right? Independent sources, allegorical. You're on your way. We then have the moral level. So your interpretations of biblical texts as metaphors for each individual soul's unfolding. And then you have the eschatological level at top, which is very close to not understanding, right? But can take you there. The novissimus, the end of days, right? Calamity, redemption, and salvation. And with that, to the top. Okay? I'll wait till David takes a snapshot. No, that's fine. By the way, Catherine's videotaping all this, so be careful. Now, my friend, okay, you ready? The feet. Okay. If you disagree with this, we'll do it privately, okay? Because I need to understand it. But what I understand is steps towards the understanding of Sharia. Just tell me if I'm close with the Arabic. Taqlid?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Sharia is the divine law in the Quran. In other words, revelation. Like Judaism and Christianity has the levels of revelation. Okay? And the Sunnah are the teachings and practices of the culture I have of Muhammad. Okay? That's the basic, and everyone in Islam that I know understand that level. They think along that level. Which takes us to, and this pronunciation I have trouble with.
اجتهاد.
Huh?
اجتهاد.
Iktinid.
اجتهاد.
You see, I had trouble last week with that, iktinid. But I know that level is an independent interpretation of legal sources by intellectual scholars. Okay? Remember last week we talked about the dangers of politics? Well, we're now not into politics, are we? We're into the truths. Okay. Independent interpretation by legal sources. And the Qiyas is the reasoning developed since Muhammad. So scholars are always trying, like the rabbis, right? Like the ministers and priests nowadays are always discussing. Like when I went to Louvain, right? I was a Jewish fellow going to a Catholic university. And the big argument was, which is better, to be a shepherd to the flock, or forever each individual is supposed to be a shepherd. See, one is Judaic and the other is Catholic, but it's just the approach. Because my fellow students I was drinking beer with at Louvain, and we were talking, they said, well, the people here at home haven't got 5 or 6 years of study. But we do learn enough to help to be a shepherd, which is sort of a biblical idea, back in David. See? But Jewish people are sort of tied down to the necessary thought that we're supposed to be teachers, rabbis. That's the highest form. Rabbi means teacher. And then we have the secret and the mystical in the understanding of Sharia. You okay with that? Okay. Now, before we go further, I have handouts. So it's this, you'll understand after I maybe talk about this. I just want to go over, because this is Judaism in context with everything else, so I want to concentrate a little on our history and the way the thought levels have taken root of what you've just seen. If you look up here, we have the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. The Talmud is a whole collection of information. And it's volumes and volumes of books. And a lot of it's written in Aramaic, which is the language of the day. when Jesus was living, and even before, and long into the Middle Ages. Aramaic was the language that was used, common. It looked like Hebrew, the same way Yiddish, which is German, and Yiddish is written with Hebrew letters, right? But when you hear it, it sounds Germanic. So the Jerusalem Talmud, but what I want you to see, our note here are the years. This is a glimpse of the study trend in Judaism by thinkers, okay? The Jerusalem Talmud was the 4th or 5th century. There was also the Babylonian Talmud, which was done later in the 6th century. Now that's going way back, talking about the part of those different levels, the dialectic approach to thinking. The Talmud in Jerusalem was really in northern Israel. It was called Jerusalem Talmud, which is, further south, a misnomer. In fact, I believe the one up north was in the Sderot, is that right? Sderot? Up north. And then there was the Jerusalem one down below. The one down in Babylon was in Iraq and the cities between Tigris and Euphrates. And it was longer than the earlier ones in the Jerusalem Talmud. One had a lot of material on agriculture, and the other side did a lot on material and civil law. But all through the ages, look at these are all rabbis over here. Sadia going, look, 1882, 942. If you had a glimpse of what was going on in the world in those days, it wasn't pretty. Mm-hmm. But there were these gems, these centers. It's like the monks in the church kept Greek philosophy alive with their writings, right? There was so much love of this type of knowledge and searching for things that you couldn't keep it quiet no matter what was going on that was terrible in the world. 1882, and then Judah Halevi in the 11th century, my friend Maimonides, Nisan Baruban. I just purposely picked out people from different ages all the way up to 1685 and 1935, Abraham Cook. So why did I pick those rabbis' names? Because you have a handout where you're getting quotes from them. And I'm not going through those quotes, but you'll see in those quotations from their writings that all this just think of it as the activity of the mind that was taking place all through the Dark Ages, even up into the Enlightenment of so-called Enlightenment of the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. Now, all of these notes have to do with creation, science, and evolution. So it's interesting, if they're going to talk about evolution, well, what were they saying back in 1882, So it's an interesting little snapshot, and I thought, there's no test. Okay,
That's good.
that's good. So let's go on to the next. The question now is, what are the personal implications of biblical text? We can see biblical text as being allegorical, but what are the implications to us personally? So we can talk about the Exodus from Egypt, from the Exodus from slavery, right? The Passover, which we celebrate, Pesach, and there's Easter. The rite of spring, which goes way back before Judaism, way back to Zoroastrianism, Gnosticism, Maccabeism, and the resurrection of the sun, which Easter is. The sun's up again. Okay. And I talked about the Garden of Eden, where we have the freedom to choose. So how does that fit into all this? Well, the Exodus, here, we're under 400 years of slavery in Egypt. 400 years. So a whole new population of slaves. None of the old timers left from Canaan that were in Egypt, right? Whole new group. And the Exodus was freedom, which is really a license to act without repercussions. You're just free to do this or that. Right? Trump can do anything. Nothing's going to happen. All right. But from the Exodus and the wilderness, the trek through going through the wilderness, we arrive at Sinai, which, and then we learn our moral responsibility. Okay. So there's a theme for each and every one of us in our lives. We all have, let's say I'm digging into going deeper in the dialectic steps of reading, but this is mine. You can have your own. Yours is as valid as mine is, and mine is yours. When we were slaves, it's like us we know our own slavery. We have our own little bits and things that hold us back at times. We know where our weaknesses are. It's like a slavery within us, holding us back. Okay? But then we get freedom from that. And we start feeling better, but maybe immorally. I mean, who knows how? We just feel free, we can do whatever we want. I'm going to disregard what went before. But then we're taken to Sinai, up in Mount Hebron. And we learn to be responsible for our freedom. So how to act once we've got rid of the dark places in our souls, in our personality. So moral responsibility. So with that, I'm going to go right up to the sod, the top part, the interpretation of a Saturday morning service that we have. We study a section in the Torah, and we discuss it. We see this great contrast between the God of Israel, the supreme principle at the top of the triangle of the universe, and the idols that we all make of man's invention. So what we have in front of our ark in the back of the screen, it says, Talifnei ata amed, which means know before whom you stand. But we can't. See, we're in time, aren't we? But we get the impulse of consciousness. We get that great collective unconscious self. It's an impulse wanting to be known. And we say, know before whom you stand. So that's a challenge to know. That's a challenge to step up those steps up to the sod, up to the universal peak, if we possibly can get there. But at least to know it's a trip. It's a vacation sometimes from what's bad. And a lot of you come to our candle lighting at the dark time of year of Hanukkah, right? And so the traditional, for Pesach, we have the traditional search for chametz. Chametz, unkosher food. For example, we have matzah coming on. So we look for all the stuff that we can clean out of the house for these 7 days for Passover. And usually in the old days, they would use one little candle and, maybe a grandmother and a grandson or something go to the house looking for breadcrumbs and things like that, and looking for it. The idea is, what are the dark places in your life that only the dimmest light can pierce? You don't need a big flashlight. The dimmest light, a little thought can sometimes pierce that dark spot, right? What sourness is hidden there, and how can you clear it out? The miracles of the Exodus revealed God's love for Israel. This is from a Judaic point of view. Before the event, God was a teacher and instructor. With the Exodus, God is revealed as a father who cares and who wants his children's love in return. Then the children of Israel will now journey towards their bar or bat mitzvah, right? Where they gain responsibility for their actions. Okay. Who's high-tech here? I think there are a lot of people here high-tech. You know what that is? What? In the old days, you remember the old days, not long ago, 30 years ago maybe, the big computers that came into being, remember they took up a big room. Probably you never saw one, but you saw pictures of them in offices, big rooms, and they had these cards. And the cards had holes in them. And the holes would go through the machine and light would come up through certain holes and not others. And that would be signaling everything was measured. If you saw a light, it was 1. If there was no light, it was a 0. These little holes are called bits. B-I-T-S, bits. Okay? And 8 of them is called a byte. You've always probably, whoops. Come on. There, bits and bytes. So if you look at what I've got there for lights through and lights not through, you have 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1. Okay? I often wonder how that thinking came into man's mind. Look what's happened with it. It's almost as though out of the ether, out of the unknown, comes a thought which is eternal, and it's translated into numbers. And then the genius of mankind and womankind is to create the numbers into further and further parts of our knowledge today, and gathering of information. I mean, to me, it's just amazing. I used to teach this at J.D. Irving and other places when I was retired, and I was helping them out, teaching all this. And so, for example, let's look at some numbers. Each circle upstairs there is a bit, and 8 of them is equal a byte of information. So with 8 bits, you can have really 256 variations of 1s and 0s, right, for the bytes. Now the size of this PowerPoint presentation is 14,928,000 bytes, or 14.928 kilobytes. And then you've got megabytes and terabytes, and there's no end to the number of bytes, and everything's exploding, all based on numbers. It's just amazing. Amazing. So let's see what it gives us. Well, there's from last week, by the way, for those who weren't here. We got familiar with your brain, right? We looked at the different types. So this is what our brain does. It can take numbers, like we just saw, and from the numbers, there's some numbers, okay? There's eighth notes, it's a number. There's a 3/4 note there. I see a quarter note. These are all numbers, aren't they? And you apply those numbers to other types of numbers, which are chords. And the tempo is 3/4, so there's 3/4 notes for each bar. And you have the treble side there. Help me, Marilyn. She's already knows what the song is. But I'm just saying, from our brain comes, we can express things in numbers which give us letters. And these letters have created words which are in Yiddish, dialect of German. So quickly, I just want to be able to say something that these radios don't understand. This is what it is. Auf dem Frippetje gebrannte Feierle in der Stadt ist heiß. Und then the Rebbe learned kleine Kinderlet, then Aleph Bet. So what that means, the children were studying with the rabbi, okay? And the children eventually ask him, the Kinderle. The children then asked the rabbi, why are we learning ABCs? Right? What do we have to learn? Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, you know. You must get that in Hebrew school, do you? Why are you doing Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, you know? And then it goes on. Actually, I don't have all the text here, but it goes on. The rabbi is saying something wonderful happens. You take an A, you take a B, you put a C, you do, and wonderful things are going to happen in your life, and you'll understand more, and you'll learn more, and you'll share your knowledge with them. You know, all just by learning A, B, C, D, right? This is an old Yiddish song from Poland, Russia, Ukraine, you know, those areas. And of course, if you have the music and the letters and the words, you can then have pictures and music.
Auf en Pripetschik brennt a Feier und in Stub is heiß. Und der Rebbe lernt kleiner Kinder nach dem Aleph Beis. Und der Rebbe lernt kleiner Kinder nach dem Aleph Beis. Sätsche Kinderlach, gedenkt Teiere, wo's ihr lernt dort. Sagt schon noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet's Aleph Ort. Sagt schon noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet's Aleph Ort.
I needed a break, that's why I put that. We're almost through. All right, let's look at some symbols then that come out of all this thinking. We looked at the triangle. Did the Jews turn the triangle upside down? Because maybe the other triangle wasn't correct. You know, this is the triangle upstairs. As we've come to certain conclusions, we think we're smart. We feel good about our egos, but hold on, maybe there's something more to learn, right? But if you take that attitude about knowledge, you can connect all the points of the triangles and you get the oneness. Okay? Then we'll look at this one. So we've seen that, the type P. And we've gone through it where the circle, and within the circle are the yes and no's, positive, negatives, but neither one is absolute, it's just relative. Here it is again. It looks like a swastika, doesn't it? That's a very ancient symbol. Think of the circle as a wheel. When you see a bicycle going, you really can't see the wheel turning, but you can see the spokes. The spokes is creation, right? The spokes are the moving things, the sound and the phloem, the artery and the vessels of nature. And that's where we get what has become hyper-political since the 30s. The early 20s and 30s. But it's the same thing. This is a Hindu symbol, as I said before. You have the circle, and within the circle you have activity, force. And that's why it was adopted by the neo-fascists today and Nazism. They thought it was apropos, I suppose, for their thoughts. Now Shaddai, the Hebrew word Shaddai, which is there in Hebrew, El Shaddai, if there was an L there, El is another name for God. It's actually the original Babylonian God. And not having a word for God, the Hebrews borrowed it Like I use the word God, G-O-D, I'm borrowing it, but I would rather say Hashem or some other word, because so Shaddai, the rabbinic theory is that the Shaddai may be formed by the particle, the shin. See the the first letter. We read from right to left, right? We read from the right brain to the left brain, from spirit to knowledge. So the Shaddai may be formed by the particle, the shin, meaning who, which, or where, or that, plus the dai, meaning sufficient or enough already. Okay? What do we sing at Passover? Da, da, yenu, right? Da, da, yenu, da, da, yenu, da. And we go through the whole service of the Passover, and we say, look, we've learned all this, but that's enough already. Let's go eat. So the dai means sufficient. So it's another word for the force of God. It's already enough. You know, we have more than we can bear, you know, and we'll come to that. That's Shaddai. So we're almost, a couple more. Now, in the circle, this is from Kabbalah. In the circle, you see the Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet. And around it are the spokes of the wheel, right? That looks a little bit like the suggestion of a swastika. And those Hebrew words circling it are the 24 attributes of God that have been drawn up by the Kabbalists of the 17th century. 24 attributes of God. So all around the circle, and within the circle, the wheel. And within the circle, the very center of everything is Adonai Echad. God is one, the oneness, right? So here are a lot of swastikas from different civilizations. The Hindu, look, the Hindu even has a little swastika within the star. That's quite a collection. The Maltese, the Greek, the Jewish, the early Jewish, the Jain, the Balinese, Lapland, Islamic, Japanese, Tibetan, Hopi, and Aztec. You know, and the interesting thing, these people probably didn't know each other when they came up with these. It's like three being mystical symbols. There's something in us that we have a human attempt to express with pictures and things. Now, I want to thank Dr. McGuy, because she sent me this in an email, and I'd like to show it. Do I have your permission? Okay. The top one is from Rabbi Yitzhak Alderstein, who works with the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And it's interesting for what we have said, just talked about. If that soul, that portion of God from above, according to the Zohar, that's the mystical writing, the central work of Jewish mysticism is what defines our ultimate selves, then words are nothing less than windows to our essence. They are the way that we invite others in to give them some understanding of who we are as unique individuals. And if our souls are holy, then so too are words. So we've gone to the holy, from the top to going through the triangle or through the circle, and we come out like that little song we saw. We come out to words, and the source of our thoughts come from a holy source. What we do with them, how we interpret them, is how we live, and we have human choice of living this way or that way. But that is what's meant in the Bible as being in the image of God. Right? So the second paragraph is by Sister Rose Paquette from the Pauline Center for Media Studies. And she writes, "This then is the resolution for 2019 that we propose, let all those within our common tradition, regardless what tradition it is, reflect on the sanctity of words. Let them have more meaning and depth than another tweet. We don't casually or carelessly throw around holy objects. If we can appreciate that words not only have power, but are possessed of holiness, we just might be more likely to use them for holier purposes." Thank you. If I took the screen down, this is what you would see. It's our art. And if the light is too strong through the windows, I can close the blinds for you. So, do you see here, see the triangle? I'm sorry. You see the triangle here. And you have the lions of Judah that look the same. That's a relativity of each lower triangle, relative. But one may be defending the Ten Commandments, and the other might be just trying to destroy them. We don't know which is which. They look the same. But they come from the bottom parts of the triangle to the top of the triangle, and the morality that we receive of how to act. And then down below here, we see what I showed you before, Dalifnei ata omed, know before whom you stand. And as I said, that's a challenge to try and know. Okay, only one after this. There you are there, with your left and right brains. And you're actually, you and me, everyone here, individually, we think inside ourselves, but we're always sort of looking outside. We're trying to receive knowledge, good feelings, receiving. That's looking outside towards the unknown to us, but we kind of know it's there. I have it represented by the cosmos, by the triangles which we have just studied and all their meanings, and even our DNA, which comes from way, way back. You know, ancestry DNA doesn't tell you how you've got DNA, chromosomes, and genes from plants, neither, does it? It kind of keeps you on the human side. But it goes, you know, a wonderment of that source. We reach out to try and understand, and sometimes, most days, we receive information from the unknown. Okay? And how it enters us and how it receives the truth. This is the common unconscious, right? This is how we deal with it is important. For example, we'll probably get information that, God, I'm not like that. That's not me. You know, where am I getting all these ideas? That's not me, you know, and it even threatens your identity because, you know, you hold on for your life or your egocentric self, right? You believe in it, right? Believe, that's where belief can have peril. So what happens to that information we're afraid of? You see, we don't like it. So we have something that's a filter between the truth and our ego, and we stuff it down into our subconscious self. Now we're getting, and I won't get into it, we get into Jung and Freud, right? Because of psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, when it can become really sick to our nature. But if we're not afraid of it, guess what? we're inspired. We may not be able to put holy words on these feelings yet, but we get inspiration. And you know when they're holy. You don't have to be explained why they're holy. And it can affect your whole life. You can get that little tiny candle that can get rid of the darkness. Okay? This is the most important slide. Okay, Leonard Nimoy, as you know him as Dr. Spock, right? Dr. Spock was famous for saying, live long and prosper. And you notice what, it's hard for me there. That's the Khamsa, isn't that the Khamsa?
Climbing used to do it.
That's the Shin, that first letter in Shaddai. Okay, the Shaddai. And remember I said it means, well, I'll tell you what it means. It's the force from that outside, that greater supreme principle that's feeding us and giving us life. May the force be with you. However, everything Dr. Spock did was supervised by, well, first of all, the Shaddai comes in, because that's the key. But he was supervised by Captain Kirk, right? Now, Captain Kirk's real name was William Shatner. And Dr. Spock was Leonard Nimoy. They were both Jewish kids, or men, okay? They came up with these ideas. They came up with the Shaddai. You know, they knew what it was. And, you know, whether it's Star Trek or Star Trek, you know, I mean, it's made Long Live and Lost, or the Force. Think of that other picture I showed you, the Force be with you. Now I'm going to get a little sentimental, because I want to tell you that William Shatner, Dr. Spock, his father, they lived in Montreal. His father was a patient in the Jewish hospital in Montreal. And my sister, who now lives in Halifax, my sister was the nurse for the department. I got to know him. She didn't know that he was the father of Captain Kirk. Okay? But he was an artist, and she was the nurse. And from his sick bed, he even did a sketch of her. So I just throw him in. All right? So may the force be with you. And I'm going to go to that star down below and click on it. We get back to the first slide. So thanks everyone.